When the first concept art of Optimus Prime for the live-action Transformers movie surfaced, it mostly played it safe. Masked, red and blue robot that transforms into a truck? Check. But fans quickly noticed one new and unexpected detail. Flames. Supposedly meant to give the classic look a bit more of a visual flair, a seemingly perceived trend at the time, this idea that you could make almost anything seem cooler just by slapping on some flames. And ironically, that seemed to be the exact thought process Hasbro had back in the 80s when they gave us this guy. Back in 1986, Hasbro was sitting pretty with their very successful toy line of robots in disguise, better known as the Transformers. They were so successful that coming into the third year, they were really thinking big with the release of a full-length animated movie that came chock full of brand new characters whose new toys they could sell to the kiddies. And leading the charge would be a new hero to lead the Autobots into the future, named hold on. I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, so let's rewind a bit. As every psychologically scarred kid from the 80s can attest, the death of Optimus Prime in the 1986 Transformers movie was a calculated move in order to make way for a new Autobot leader, a changing of the guard, if you will, which would be the central core of the movie's story. Of an unassuming young character, a little rough around the edges, who goes on a journey to unlock his true potential, and in this case, literally grow into the savior of the story. The classic hero's tale that we've been told 1,000 times before. And in this case, it all begins with a young Autobot named Hot Rod. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Hot Rod was part of the third year of Transformers toys sold in 1986, one of only 3 new Autobot cars introduced along with Cup and Blur. And whether it was from his bright red, orange, and yellow colors topped off with a fiery deco, or his fairly proportionate and heroic-looking frame, or the sleek and cool-looking alt mode that he transformed into, visually alone, Hot Rod's toy definitely outshined the other two. And the plot definitely thickened when a little below these guys on the catalog was another similarly flamey new character named Rodimus Prime. But shh, that was meant to be the great reveal of the movie that us kiddies were not supposed to know about at the time. But even as early as then, it was pretty clear that when it came to Hot Rod, there was more than meets the eye. So, Hot Rod's tech specs gives us a clearer understanding of what Hasbro was going for with their new character in terms of primary function, which was that of a Cavalier, a fairly alien word for my 10-year-old vocabulary that traditionally referred to a knight, or a fairly decent basketball team that for the life of them just couldn't find a way to get past Jordan and the Bulls in the playoffs. Sorry, couldn't help it. Cavalier also carried connotations of being daring and sometimes reckless, which at its worst could be taken as a dismissive, carefree attitude, often disregarding the feelings or safety of others, or the seriousness of the situation, which for better or worse will come into play later on in this story. But thinking a little bit more positively, Hot Rod is portrayed as exactly that in the movie. A young, headstrong, impulsive individual full of confidence who may not always fall in line, but who more often than not had his heart generally in the right place. Anyway, if you discount poor Arblus and Kranix, along with their fellow Lithuanians who are consumed by the new big bad of the story, Unicron, at the start of the movie, Hot Rod is technically the very first new Transformers character introduced, and is quickly established as a major player in the story as the BFF of the new human character, Daniel, son of the OG Autobot ally, Spike, voiced by actor Judd Nelson, who at the time was the epitome of cool, thanks to his iconic role as the rebellious delinquent John Bender in The Breakfast Club. Hot Rod literally kicks things off with his iconic line of,
"If you're gonna ride, Dano, ride in style,"
as he scoops up a falling Daniel in mid-transformation and races off to welcome an arriving Autobot shuttle on Lookout Mountain, with the sounds of Stan Bush's Dare in the background, which I argue is a vastly superior song to the touch, Fight Me. That being said, as most people already know, Hot Rod is the first one to discover Decepticons in the shuttle and pretty much single-handedly kicks off the whole Battle of Autobot City, which eventually ends with the final one shall stand and one shall fall battle between Optimus Prime and Megatron. A battle in which Hot Rod plays an unfortunate part in the outcome that almost completely destroys his reputation for many Transformers fans. Okay, I know everyone knows what I'm referring to, but in the fun spirit of reliving past childhood traumas, let's do this! At the penultimate moment of the fight, Prime has Megatron on the proverbial ropes, begging for mercy, unaware that the crafty Decepticon leader had one more ace up his sleeve with an Energon laser easily within his reach, something that Hot Rod spots and tries to take away from Megatron. Of course, Hot Rod is easily, and I'd dare to say, unfairly blamed for this series of unfortunate events. As I mean, what would you do if you saw your hero, no, your father figure, in unknowingly mortal danger? Okay, fine, you could have just given a warning shout, but where's the drama in that? No, but seriously though, at the risk of possibly starting a flame war with this maybe unpopular take, putting away all that misdirected anger and judgment aside, at the moment, I'm pretty sure that most of us would have probably done the same thing, right? Right? Anyway, after that, I'd like to think that for the rest of the movie, Hot Rod did give us more reasons to actually like him. You see, despite his character of a brash, energetic, impulsive fellow being the template for future similar and bordering on annoying characters, I'd argue that Hot Rod is definitely the most likable, relatable, and simply best of the bunch, and most deserving of greater things. And let's cite specific examples, shall we? Special shout out to friend of the toy shelf, brother from down under, Ordy, the fantastic Mr. Fox, for helping me flesh this list out of how Hot Rod isn't just any Autobot. He's the alpha male we all secretly wish we could be. As I mentioned earlier, Hot Rod got the coolest alt mode in the 1986 movie and a heart to match, always looking out for others. Like taking care of Daniel or hauling the Dinobots into the shuttle, definitely not a glamorous job, but he did it anyway. He thinks fast under pressure, like when he spotted the hole in the shuttle and chose to attack before the Decepticons could reach the city. He's not afraid to challenge authority or assumptions, like when Cup says,
"The Insecticons are in our way!"
and Hot Rod flips it by saying,
"Wrong! They're our way in!"
Confident? Absolutely, but never arrogant. When he messes up, he owns it, as when he humbly asks for Optimus Prime's forgiveness at his impulsive actions.
Optimus, forgive me.
He respects the Matrix, passes it on to Magnus like a gentleman, and always brings hope.
You're right, it can.
What do you know about it, lad?
I just got this feeling.
He protects his teammates and has a never-quit attitude.
We can't hold out forever, Cup, but we can give them one humongous repair bill.
Whether it's befriending Junkions,
Ba weep grana, weep ninny bong,
fixing Cup, slicing a robo-squid with a pizza cutter, or taking the worst-looking ship in the galaxy because
who cares, as long as it flies.
Hot Rod always adapts, always leads. He speaks his mind.
I have nothing but contempt for this court.
And never loses sight of the mission at hand. And when the time comes in the end of the movie, Hot Rod regains the Matrix and fulfills his ultimate destiny as the Chosen One, and is transformed into Rodimus Prime, just in time to light their darkest hour and defeat Unicron. Whew, that was quite a lot, wasn't it? Well, with that, let's take a quick detour into the next phase of Hot Rod's character arc, as the new Autobot leader, Rodimus Prime. Now, while I do believe that for the most part, Hasbro grossly underestimated our attachment and love for the OG Autobot and Decepticon leaders, Optimus Prime and Megatron, to their credit, I do think they knew that they just couldn't give us cookie-cutter replacements. And aside from obviously looking visually different from their predecessors, personality-wise, both Rodimus Prime and Galvatron were definitely their own characters. In place of the brutal and ruthless yet charismatic hero in his own story, Megatron, we got the unpredictably chaotic and batshit crazy Galvatron. And instead of the confident, seasoned, and wise Optimus Prime, we got an inexperienced, unsure, and self-doubting Rodimus Prime, a character burdened with the pressure of stepping out of the shadow cast by his hero. And you know what? I'll be the first one to step up and give props to the writers for giving us these takes for their new leaders. I mean, for all his faults, I don't doubt that anyone placed in Rodimus Prime's position wouldn't feel the same way. Everyone has to start somewhere, and Rodimus' story of having to deal with his new position and grow into the role of a good and effective leader presented so many cool storytelling possibilities. Unfortunately, whether it was the writers being unsuccessful at creating a compelling character we could all get behind and root for, and instead giving us a whiner, or the fact that Hasbro just couldn't take all the hate flung their way for killing off Optimus Prime, it wasn't long before the OG leader was back and Rodimus was given the shaft. Okay, actually, he willingly gave up possession of the Matrix and magically returned to being Hot Rod. I mean, while I can't argue that having Optimus Prime back was great, I do think it's unfortunate that it came at the expense of Rodimus Prime, and ultimately Hot Rod, as his growth and development in the movie was seemingly erased, as his first line back was literally,
All right, Hot Rod is back. Let's party!
"Alright, Hot Rod's back." Despite being originally brought in to take the Transformers into the year 2000 and beyond, the aborted story of Rodimus Prime and Hot Rod basically meant that he didn't really amount to much even in the pages of the original Marvel comics. In the US, he did become a Target Master alongside Cup and Blur, which at least led to a retooled version of his original toy being re-released in 1987. But that was pretty much it for him in the US comics. In the UK comics, Hot Rod did fare a little bit better as writer Simon Furman used him more often battling a time-traveling Galvatron. But I would argue that Rodimus Prime had a more interesting storyline, wherein the burden of bearing the matrix of leadership was more than just symbolic. It slowly corrupted Rodimus, tainting his mind with remnants of Unicron's dark essence. At his lowest point, he became a vessel for evil, turning against his allies before being saved by Cup's intervention. And in another alternate future timeline wherein the Decepticons ruled and the Autobots drooled, Rodimus Prime died fighting a doomed resistance against Galvatron's Earth conquest, and his corpse hung as a symbol of lost hope and served the purpose of keeping a deranged Galvatron company. Anyway, despite his less than glamorous portrayal in the pages of the original Marvel comics, things worked out a lot better for Hot Rod in the IDW comics years later. Introduced in his own Spotlight issue in 2006, we first see Hot Rod making the most Hot Rod entrance imaginable, literally hitching a ride on a passing meteoroid on a one-way trip to an icy moon in order to infiltrate a Decepticon penal colony located on the surface called Styx, and rescue an old friend named Dealer. Anyway, while on this mission, he is reminded of a previous mission wherein he and Dealer were assigned to recover an ancient Cybertronian artifact called the Magnificence. Unfortunately, that mission goes wrong, and while Hot Rod manages to take off with the Magnificence, the rest of his team is killed, except Dealer, of course, who ends up getting captured. Or does he? So, for those in the know, it's no surprise that the original mission was actually a setup organized by the Decepticons to have Hot Rod recover the artifact for themselves, and Dealer, or should I say, Double Dealer, was actually a double agent working for them. In the end, after rescuing Dealer from Styx, in an attempt to trick Hot Rod into showing him where he hid the Magnificence, Dealer's double-dealing ways are exposed, and Hot Rod doesn't hesitate in taking out his old friend. And speaking of old friends, despite my channel's rather young age, I feel that I've made a good number of old friends through all the interactions with all of you, and I am eternally grateful for that. I love hearing from you guys. And so, if you have any thoughts, insights, or nostalgic experiences with regards to Hot Rod or Rodimus Prime, tell me about them in the comments below. Go ahead and tell me your story. And please like and share this video, and if you haven't yet, give my channel a sub. Now, while this version of Hot Rod doesn't exactly transform into Rodimus Prime like in the original '86 movie, IDW does find a fairly creative and cheeky way of throwing in that little detail from his original story. wherein, in an attempt to fool Hot Rod into working with him and his fellow Decepticon refugees, the sweet-talking mercenary Swindle butters up his ego by calling him Rodimus Prime. And while he doesn't exactly become the bearer of the Matrix per se, he does manage to recover it from Starscream after it is lost to the Autobots due to the events of the storyline All Hail Megatron. Unfortunately for all his troubles, he gets his chest blasted away by a returned Megatron and would have died had it not been for the Matrix miraculously preserving his spark. Hot Rod eventually makes it back to Cybertron, wherein he returns the Matrix to Optimus Prime, and he is officially anointed from then on out as Rodimus. Anyway, after the end of the Great War, while the usual suspects like Bumblebee and Starscream set off to establish a new Cybertronian society to numerous political and Game of Thrones-ish hijinks, Rodimus sets his sights to the stars, driven largely by his personal desire to do something meaningful in this time of peace. Rodimus forms a crew of 200 plus former Autobots and Decepticons and crams them into a new starship called the Lost Light and sets off on an ideological and spiritual journey to search for the legendary Knights of Cybertron, a mythical group believed to hold the key to Cybertron's golden age and possibly its future salvation. And in a rather funny twist of events, he eventually shares co-captain duties with a newly reformed Autobot Megatron, whom I guess he had since forgiven for blowing out his chest. And it's all his numerous adventures with the Lost Light crew that pretty much takes up the rest of his story in the IDW universe. It is worth noting though that before IDW lost the Transformers license in 2022, they published one more standalone limited series called The Last Bot Standing, which, while not part of their long-established Transformers universe, does pay homage to it by employing the same artistic style and feel. Anyway, in this sort of what-if story set off in the very far-off future, similar to Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns or Old Man Logan, we are reacquainted with an old, broken-down Rodimus, once known as Hot Rod and later as Rodimus Prime, who is awakened in the once energon-rich planet of the Noct. It's here that he comes across a contingent of Cybertronians led by a former Decepticon named Steeljaw. Initially, everyone is happy to find Rodimus. That is, until they reveal their deep, dark secret. Apparently, after years of war and destroying planet after planet, energon had become so sparse across the galaxy that in order to survive, Cybertronians literally had to transform their physiology over time to learn to subsist on biofuel, which they harvested from, well, organic beings. Ugh. And so it's up to a solitary, reawakened Rodimus to protect the innocent and helpless Donoctians and take on his fellow Cybertronians, which also featured an ominously named character called the Veteran, who turned out to be his old friend Wheelie, or to be more specific, his head on wheels. No, really. In the end, Rodimus is able to defeat Steeljaw, Wheelie, and an abomination called Unstoppimus, save the inhabitants of the Noct, and help them harness their resources wisely and return to rest, finally at peace. And with that, Rodimus didn't just survive the end of his kind, he ensured no one else would have to. And with his story essentially done in the comics, true to his exploratory ways, Hot Rod went off to France. No, I kid. How's that for a smooth segue to another quite controversial version of Hot Rod, the one from the live-action movies. While he was rumored here and there to appear in earlier movies, Hot Rod, or should I say,
Hot Rod,
finally made his live-action debut in the 5th movie, The Last Knight, where he was French. And that's all I have to say about that. Okay, fine. In a vacuum, I'll admit, as far as Baver's designs go, Hot Rod is pretty good. I mean, he's got a fairly clean and humanoid robot mode with arguably extremely round eyes, and he transforms into a pretty sleek black Lamborghini Centenario LP770-4. Sorry, I'm not really a car guy. Is that how you say it? With, to be fair, some orange details in robot mode, which seems to be the only callback to the OG Hot Rod's design. Yup, the same movies that gave Optimus Prime his flames apparently stripped Hot Rod of his. It's worth noting though that a slightly more accurate looking concept design of Hot Rod does exist. I mean, if you look really close, you can actually make out his signature back fins. Anyway, in the movie, he is tasked with protecting the rather attractive professor of English literature. When is a female character in the Bayverse not attractive? Vivian Wembley. And aside from his rather stereotypical portrayal of a Frenchman, it's a pretty effective weapon of choice that allows him to
Stop the time!
He also manages to survive the entire movie, so kudos to him. And with his live-action movie appearance, of course, came new toys, which honestly there isn't much to write home about in my opinion, except that is for this ironically knocked off third-party masterpiece version. Now, the original release I believe is from DX9 called La Hire, but I opted for a knockoff version which was cheaper and actually nicer. But let's be honest, hearing me rave or talk about toys of live-action Hot Rod isn't what most of you are after, so let's get back to the real deal, shall we? Now, I already talked about the original Hot Rod toy released in 1986, but I didn't really touch upon the Rodimus Prime toy released that same year, so let's do that, shall we? Now, while I would say that the original Hot Rod was a pretty good-looking toy for its time, I unfortunately can't really say the same for Rodimus Prime, whose toy looked pretty slim, extremely thin, and looked nothing like what I'd imagine an Autobot leader should look like. That face is pretty rough. Even similar design elements with Hot Rod like the flame decals and prominent yellow back fin couldn't really save this guy in my opinion. And it really didn't help that his alt mode, which I guess was meant to be an upgrade of Hot Rod's sleek race car mode, a futuristic truck, which to its credit may have been based on an actual real-world concept, the GM Bison, left a lot to be desired, looking more like a space Winnebago. Anyway, in 2006, we would finally get our first modern Hot Rod toy, now simply going by Rodimus due to, I'm thinking, copyright reasons, from the Classics line. To be honest, even if he's like 20 years old at this point, I'd still say that he's one of the best existing Hot Rod toys out there, especially since a few years after its release, it was a significant beneficiary of a really cool third-party upgrade kit by Fans Project, who gave us the Protector set that allowed us to convert this guy into a Classics Rodimus Prime. One of the first third-party sets I personally splurged on and still have to this day due to its pure coolness. But if you wanted an official modern Rodimus Prime toy, you'd have to wait a year later or so for the Titanium series version. This guy was unique because it incorporated the alt mode trailer in the transformation into the robot, which was based on a design concept from Filipino Don Figueroa, who to this day I will contend is one of the best Transformers artists ever. To be honest though, I never got this one as I stayed away from the Titanium line in general, given that it was widely recognized by many collectors as one of the worst Transformers lines of all time. Now, taking another little detour from G1 Hot Rod toys, I'd like to mention a couple of cool alternate versions of Hot Rod. The first would be the Kiss Players version from Japan, a sort of spin-off from the popular Binaltech line that featured mostly G1 Autobots transforming into highly detailed and officially licensed modern cars. And in Hot Rodimus's case, he transformed into a Red Ford GT and came packed with a driver, the dumpling munching Xiao Xiao. See, in case you're wondering why this line was called Kiss Players, it's because these were special Transformers who came partnered with little girls and drew power from their kisses. Yeah, okay, moving on. The second would be the Transformers animated Rodimus Prime released in 2010. While he was far from being a main character in the series, although at one point he was initially conceived to be a rival of the young Optimus Prime, a role which eventually went to Sentinel Prime, Rodimus Prime eventually appeared towards the end of the series, once again voiced by Judd Nelson, wherein he leads his team of Autobots in an unsuccessful attempt at defending a space bridge from a band of raiding Decepticons. Despite a few cool moves here and there with his twin bowcaster, Rodimus Prime ultimately succumbs to some weaponized cosmic rust. It's really a glorified cameo, but it was good enough to give him a pretty cool toy which thankfully managed to get released before the line's abrupt cancellation. I mean, yes, it's a super stylized rendition of Hot Rod that isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I love it, especially how his weapon of choice is neatly incorporated into his sleek car alt mode. But now back to G1. In 2016, we finally got an updated deluxe Hot Rod that was a Headmaster, which would in itself be cool, except I don't know, I can't say I'm a big fan of this particular mold in general, as I find the proportions way off. I think whoever designed this majorly dropped the ball by giving him comically oversized shoulders that they practically hid Hot Rod's most defining design detail, aside from the flames that is. His yellow back fin, you can barely see it. That being said, it didn't stop me from upgrading to the more superior decoed and retooled Japanese Legends version that came with his traditional Target Master buddy, Firebolt. A couple years later, we got a pretty interesting version of Rodimus Prime as part of the Power of the Primes line. This version featured a deluxe-sized hot rod that could be plugged into a trailer to give us Winnebago mode, and that trailer could also be converted into a frame to plug the hot rod robot into to form Rodimus Prime. Did you get all of that? I mean, in concept, it did sound cool, but I ended up passing on it. I was sorely tempted though to get the repainted evil Rodimus Unicronus version, which featured a new head sculpt with blood red visor and a cool handlebar mustache and goatee, which I guess was a callback to his corrupted days in the UK comics. I don't know, these all-in-one concepts do sound cool, but ultimately ends up with us getting 2 or 4 compromised modes. Thankfully, moving forward, Hasbro seemingly learned their lesson, as in 2020 and 2021 respectively, we finally got what to this date many, including myself, consider to be the definitive chug versions of both Hot Rod from the Studio Series 86 line and Rodimus Prime from the Kingdom line. While not perfect, they both come pretty close. Anyway, as for Masterpiece versions, in 2011, we got our first official Masterpiece, Rodimus Convoy, which, while not quite successful, deserves points for the ambition behind this design, which was meant to be the ultimate version of Rodimus Prime and Hot Rod. See, the robot mode was supposed to be Hot Rod, that could either transform to his familiar race car alt mode or be enlarged into Rodimus Prime. And that race car alt mode could apparently be plugged into the Rodimus Prime trailer to give us the Space Winnebago. So yeah, 2 robot modes, 2 alt modes. Like I said, pretty ambitious. Unfortunately, the final execution was lacking, as there was nothing that really differentiated the Hot Rod and Rodimus bot modes aside from a different face and a few millimeters difference in height. No, really. I myself didn't bother with the all-in Japanese version and opted to get the more streamlined US release that switched out Rodimus's trailer for a Target Master, which itself didn't really last long in my collection either. See, initially I figured that I didn't need a trailer since, who really displays their Transformers in alt mode anyway? But on a rare occasion where I was feeling extra masochistic with my fingers, I decided to transform all my Masterpiece 86 Autobots in one go. And seeing the Masterpiece Rodimus trailerless, he was basically an oversized hot rod, got me thinking, this would not do. So enter third-party DX9's Carrie, who, while sporting a slightly stylized, more Studio Ox design, gave me what I needed in my ideal Masterpiece, Rodimus Prime. A properly sized robot which incorporated the trailer into its transformation. Granted, the resulting alt mode is a little stubby. It'll do for me. Anyway, 5 years later, Takara realized their first attempt at a Masterpiece Hot Rod needed a revisit, a redo, and so they gave us Masterpiece Hot Rod 2.0, which to this day remains the de facto Masterpiece Hot Rod in most collector shelves. That is, unless you are a Fans Toys fanatic like me and opted to get their third-party version called Hoodlum. Like I said, there really is nothing wrong with the official version, and for some it's seen as the superior one. But for me, I think Hoodlum visually looks better, so clunkier engineering be damned, he's the chosen one for my collection, my personal choice. And speaking of choices, this reminds me of the rare time I actually went against my usual Fans Toys fanaticism and went with the controversial choice of switching out my Fans Toys Rouge for the official version, well, sort of the Autobot RC. If you want to know the reason why, you can check out this story over here. Or if you want other Transformers stories, you can check out this playlist over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you come back for more.